Well, good day. I'm Seth Naeve, and a soybean agronomist at the University of Minnesota, and I'd like to spend a little bit of time speaking with you about the annual quality reports that are supported by the U.S. farmers and the checkoff and the United States Soybean Export Council. We feel that this is a unique service for purchasers of U.S. soybeans. Just a little bit of background on the quality reports and surveys. The value of U.S. soybeans is to the end user is really dependent primarily on both the abundance of protein, oil, carbohydrates, and the relative quality of each of those primary constituents. So the value of the crop that the U.S. producer produces and exports is really dependent on those factors, and the purchasers are buying those quantity of product based on what the farmer produces at the farm gate. So the better the quality, the higher the value to the end user, and the higher the price will be for that the end user will be willing to pay for that product. The issue for the U.S. farmer and those of us that are working to help market the product overseas and domestically is that these values, the protein and oil, carbohydrates, and then the quality of each of these things are highly variable across both geography and time. So time and space, or geography and year, if you will. Showing here is a map of the U.S. that we've created through the survey of sampling soybeans throughout the U.S. This particular map represents about 15,000 soybean samples collected from 2006 through 2013. And this pretty well represents the variation in protein levels that are inherent in the U.S. crop. This is the background variation that we might see because it's over a large number of years. So this is the average protein difference and variation that we see within the U.S. And we note that Ohio, Michigan, Kentucky, and even down into Arkansas, that's cut off a bit here, certainly have the highest protein levels of anywhere in the country. And then some states, North Dakota, Minnesota, into Iowa, tend to have a little bit lower protein levels. But you'll also notice that protein varies significantly even within states. So using a state boundary isn't necessarily the best way to identify soybeans of a particular value. Showing it here is a similar map for oil. Most importantly, I think you'll note that the oil concentration in the soybean crop is basically inversely related to the protein. So high protein areas, again, like Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, tend to have lower protein levels, where some of the more deficient areas like south central Minnesota and north central Iowa were deficient in protein, they have quite good oil levels. But this relationship isn't exactly perfect. If we look at the sum of the protein and oil, and this is a value that is kind of an index for the value of the U.S. or the soybean crop to the end user, because it sums both the protein concentration and the oil concentration, which are the two most valuable bits in that soybean. This gives you an idea of the relative value of those soybeans harvested in various areas. And although this is a little bit blotchy in this particular map, you'll see that there is a definite gradient from the southeastern part of the Corn Belt to the northwestern Corn Belt, where in the southeast we produce soybeans that have high protein plus oil levels. That's 55% typically or more, protein plus oil, whereas when we get into North Dakota, we have soybeans that tend to be in the low 50s for protein plus oil. And this affects their overall value to the end user. And this is important for the farmer to try to combat this in low areas, and those farmers in those areas that have the darker colors, they want to try to promote the value of these soybeans. So working with agronomists and breeders, we want to increase the overall value of the whole crop, but also work on those areas where we're most deficient in terms of the end user. So back to a little bit of the history of the U.S. soybean crop quality survey. This has been conducted since 1986 officially, but there were formal quality presentations that were made in Tokyo as far back as 1984. So we've got 30 years of history with supporting our end users, our buyers, with information on the quality of the U.S. crop. And the goal, again, is to provide new crop quality data to aid in international customers with their purchasing decisions. So we're trying to give them information to help with their buying decisions over the upcoming year. We feel that really the knowledge is power here in enabling them to make good buying decisions based on information that we present to them. The U.S. is really the only exporting nation that does a survey like this, and the customers are very thankful for this type of information before they start to see their new crop soybeans imported. The primary focus of this survey has been on whole soybean purchasers in Northeast Asia. So this is primarily for soybean buyers that will crush the crop domestically. Quality conferences have occurred in Japan, Taiwan, China, and Korea over the past 10 years or more. The results have been also supplied to all the U.S. USEC regional offices, and they've been distributed through a variety of other channels, websites, and things like that, as well as also to academics and QSSBs in the U.S. to be able to utilize that information for their own promotional use, own educational use with their farmers within states and regions as well, and also to promote to the soybean breeding companies the importance of breeding for high value soybeans so that we can export a higher value product. In addition, a food soybean quality survey was added in 2007, and this adds an additional level of value in that we have access to customers who are buying soybeans specifically for food type uses. So these are a different segment of buyers, but they're interested in tofu soybeans or natto soybeans, and so we're able to provide them with detailed information on specific varieties and regions of production for those individual purchases. Real briefly, a couple of slides on the methods. We send kits, soybean sample kits, to 5,000 to 10,000 U.S. producers annually. Those are distributed based on production by state, so that high-producing states, large producing states, receive the bulk of the sampling kits. And by early November, we receive about 1,000 to 2,000 samples back for analysis. And these very closely track production, and so we're able to do a very thorough and statistically significant survey of the U.S. crop. We only ask farmers for 2 bits of information, and that's the zip code of the city nearest the farm where they sampled this individual crop, as well as the variety name. Samples come in, and because of our time constraints, we need to turn these samples quickly so that we can develop a report by late October, early November. Samples come in, we measure moisture, we estimate seed size, we also determine the amount of foreign material in each sample, as well as analyzing them for protein, oil, and amino acid concentrations by near-infrared spectroscopy. We develop written reports and PowerPoints that are developed, again, prior to these conferences that are held in November in Northeast Asia. An important part of these conferences is providing them information beyond just the raw quality information that we promote with these conferences. A really key piece of this is educating the buyers about U.S. production. We generally have farmer leaders that are able to give introductions to their individual farms and their family farms that they're operating on, as well as give them an idea of how the weather impacted their individual production area in that year. And then the presenter is able to then move on and talk about the weekly USDA crop reports, drought monitor reports, of which many of the buyers have been seeing on a weekly basis, but they may not have a really good summary of the impact of that on the U.S. total production or on those things, on how they affect the overall quality of the U.S. crop as well. So we provide them summaries of drought maps when we have droughty type conditions in the U.S. and where the drought occurred, where it impacted yield and quality. We can also drill down in utilizing USDA NASS data and really show directly where crops were impacted by the weather, whether it was planting time was delayed because of because of wet soil conditions, whether we had cool conditions that delayed development, and how the overall crop condition looked relative to long-term averages. And those are the types of information that they're seeing in their publications, and we're trying to give them a baseline in how that really impacted farmers on the ground. Just some shots of us presenting some of our information in Japan. We also provide participants quality data on a state and regional basis. And this gives them an idea of how the U.S. crop as a whole, as well as states and regions, will look in the upcoming import year as compared to the previous year, because many of these buyers are seeing U.S. soybeans come through their plants currently, and they understand the quality of that crop. We're there to help them show them how the new crop will be different from what they're looking at currently. So some tabular data, we'll just give them an example of how the U.S. crop compares to previous years. And in this example, the 2013 crop was very good. We had protein levels that were slightly up, as well as oil levels that were slightly up over the long-term average. So the buyers are very happy at this type of information showed on an average of the U.S. crop. But purchasers are buying not just U.S. soybeans. They're sourcing soybeans from the Gulf or the Pacific Northwest. They're sourcing containers from specific areas within the U.S., so it's important for us to provide them more detailed information. So with that, we give them detailed maps showing variation in protein, oil levels, amino acids, sugars, and how those various constituents may differ from the previous year. So shown here is a map of 2013, and as you remember, we had a variation in protein on a long-term basis, and we see the same type of a variation in the 2013 crop. We can use this kind of information to help the buyers and say, well, we have protein in Indiana, Ohio, Michigan. That looks like it's going to average in that high 35s this coming year to 36%. We also know that soybeans sourced from Chicago might have a protein level of X% from this type of a figure. We can also drill in a little bit further and give them an idea of how those specific areas might differ from previous years. And I mentioned Chicago, and if buyers are buying soybeans in containers from Chicago, we'll just note a figure like this and tell them, yes, there's very high quality soybeans that are available in southern Wisconsin and southern Illinois, but that those buyers need to specify a protein level if they're looking for a certain level for protein. We can also show them that soybeans from the P&W from 13 should look pretty good compared to previous years, because the dark blue indicates protein levels that are 0.5 to 1.5% higher than the long-term average in this current year. So soybeans coming from North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, northern Iowa, the area that drains into the Pacific Northwest, should be of an overall quality that's better than what they've seen in previous years. We get lots and lots of questions, and people are very interested in both the crop quality as well as the crop conditions. But this also gives us a chance to meet one-on-one with the individual purchasers and connect with them and discuss our farms and the quality of the crop, as well as to meet these buyers at their places of business and connect with them to learn about their challenges in terms of quality and crushing and end use, as well as give them information about what we have to offer them. Shown on top of some plant trips to some crushers in China, as well as even end users. In the bottom, we have a Yuba factory in Japan, as well as here a large end user is a swine genetics company in China. And so we're very interested in connecting with those end users to help support the idea that U.S. soybeans would be a valuable ingredient in their rations. So just a couple current projects that we're looking at right now. In my lab, we're investigating the quality of the U.S. versus the South American crop. So we want to definitively answer questions about how U.S. soybeans differ from both Brazilian, Argentine, Paraguayan, Uruguayan soybeans. So we have a 3-year study supported by the United Soybean Board to look at this question and provide, I believe, what will be a definitive answer to how those individual protein oils, carbohydrates, as well as secondary and tertiary components, the amino acids and the fatty acids, differ from South American. And we're also doing a meta-analysis of the quality of the U.S. crop over time, as well as how it competes with South American survey. So an analysis of many analyses, if you will. So a quick advertisement: if you'd like to contribute a soybean sample for the U.S. Quality survey, please contact me, and my information is right here. The best way to reach me is by email at naeve002@umn.edu. So I thank you for your time and your attention today.